All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Hannah. You probably know me from poking around your inbox. I lead email and community over at Grow Class. If you're not familiar with Grow Class, we are a 6-week growth marketing course and community filled with founders, marketers, and freelancers. We teach folks the skills they need to grow their careers and businesses. Our next cohort actually kicks off on July 17th. So if you're interested in learning more about Grow Class, I can actually drop a link in the chat for you. You can peek at it there. But today I'm really excited to learn how to use AI for content marketing with Hiba Amin. So Hiba is the head of content at Copy.ai, and she's also a Grow Class alumni. She loves chatting and connecting with the community about all things content related. So we're super excited to have her here today and have her share her genius with us, because Hiba is amazing. I will share Hiba's links in the chat as well. So if you want to connect with Hiba, poke at some of her work, you can find her at those links. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat as we go through. We will have time for a Q&A. And just a reminder that there is no such thing as a dumb question. We're all here to learn. AI is hella new, so it's a judgment-free zone. We just ask that you keep it kind and respectful. And with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Hiba to learn how to use AI for content marketing. Over to you, Hiba.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. Super excited to chat about this. Similar to what Hannah said, there are absolutely no dumb questions. I have asked many questions in my last 4 months getting into this space. And so just trying to share some of what I've learned these past 4 months at Copy.ai and help you do a better job using AI in your day-to-day. I think before I share my screen, I definitely want to say I'm in the camp of definitely don't think AI is taking anyone's job anytime soon, if ever, to be honest. I think that AI is a tool that's going to help us do our jobs faster and better. But there's so many areas that, you just need the human touch. The content is generic that comes out compared to, if we were to write it ourselves. And there's just so many avenues that, people need to be involved to build a truly quality and value-driven content program at your business. So with that little rant out of the way, I'm just going to share my screen here. And bear with me, we were trying to figure out how to do this so I could keep some notes for myself. So hopefully you're not seeing these notes on my screen. I'll just double check the chat, but seems all good. Okay. So yeah, a little bit about me just real quick. Some fun stuff just to get to know each other. I'm a proud dog mom. I absolutely love Survivor. I live in Calgary, Alberta, and I have been desperately trying to find hobbies outside of marketing this past year. And so I'm kind of like starting to find some like propagating plants and running little mini science experiments and pretending to know what carpentry is. So all a work in progress, but just a lot of fun. And then on the credibility side around what gives me any authority to talk about this, I'm the head of content at Copy.ai, a generative AI platform, and we'll walk through some of that later in this talk. I've been working at tech startups for about 7 years now. So typically I've typically been on a team of one, and so really trying to hack my way through finding the best, most efficient ways to do things has been top of mind for the past, maybe 5 years at this point. I write about AI for a marketing audience on a daily basis. I've used AI in my content writing process at least once or twice now. And I'm also married to a machine learning engineer. And so beyond needing to fact check through generative AI platforms or Google, I can just kind of scream into the office next to me at home, which is really great. So a little bit about the agenda for today. Just do a very quick lesson on, GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. I want to just call out some things that you should watch out for when you're using AI within your content. I'll walk through a few prompt best practices, and we'll also go through a live demo of using AI to create content. In this last part, I have a bunch of examples ready to show. But yeah, throughout this talk, please feel free to write some notes in chat, write some questions, especially at that part. We can kind of workshop together, going through some of those examples that might be most relevant to you. Cool. So let's dive into a very quick lesson here. So GPT, this is like a, let's say, textbook way of saying it. It uses a deep learning approach known as transformer architecture. So it allows it to understand and create human-like text based on its input. But Sarah from Grow Class put it best. It's just a fancy way of saying that this thing uses math to predict words. And so just walking through a bit of the step-by-step process, again, real quick at a high level, this just helped me through my journey understand how to best use this platform and avoid situations where I'm like, this thing's broken, this thing sucks, when in reality, I just wasn't using it properly. So the first thing is that it uses tokens, and the TLDR of that is that this large language model basically translates things that we understand, which are characters and words, and turns it into a language that the computer understands, numbers. And so if you go into OpenAI's tokenizer tool, you can actually kind of just go in and write some words and see how things get broken out into tokens, and how many tokens. I think that's the more important piece there. And the more important piece around that, why it's important, is I think you can think of GPT 3.5 and 4 in this way. It's like working with limitations that we encounter in our own marketing. So meta descriptions have to be a certain length, Twitter character limits, and even when we're like in social contexts, we don't want to send our friend necessarily this massive novel of text. So just understanding that there's certain confines to work with means that we can work with it better. So for example, most of the free generative AI platforms out there are running on a GPT 3.5 model. And so it has a maximum input and output of approximately 3,000 words. So if you put in an hour-long webinar transcript, it's likely going to be 3,000 words. You're not going to have any more room for an output, so you're just not going to get anything back. So I think in those moments, that's where using a paid subscription on a GPT-4 model, oh, something just went off. Okay. So using GPT-4 shines because in some way, there's not really a limit. And so some examples I would say that you can use for GPT-3 is generating outbound emails or short form blog posts or summarizing articles. Whereas in GPT-4, you can input, for example, an hour-long webinar transcript, and from that generate potentially a blog, social copy, and email too, all within one prompt. Or you can generate, an ebook. I didn't realize there are so many Canadians on this call, so I did have a Canadian example in the back of my head. So if you take the lyrics of "Oh Canada," GPT-3 can take that input about 48 times. GPT-4 can take that input about 385 times. So just to kind of put a bit of a scale there around input and output, it's a lot. I think the other thing that I was definitely guilty of is thinking that ChatGPT and GPT were the same. I think at one point I was calling it ChatGPT 3.5, and my husband would just kind of chuckle at me, and me not realizing why. So yeah, I think basically ChatGPT is a platform and GPT is the model behind it. That's built by OpenAI that a lot of generative AI platforms use to power their own generations. So step 2, we put this input in, it does a whole bunch of things around numbers. And this is just one of the stages, we'll call them, that goes into the model prediction. So for the sake of simplicity, I don't think this is the most important thing for us to cover today, but I do think it's really interesting, is just going through one of the stages that helps AI make these predictions. So attention is a stage, and it was studied and developed at Google, and it focuses on which words are most important to understand the meaning behind a sentence. So basically, when you're having a conversation, these are the words that you're paying most attention to. So in the example, we can look at 2 different sentences with the word blue. The first one is I'm feeling blue. GPT within this stage would pay attention to the words feeling and blue. It would understand that those two words work together to convey a certain emotion. Whereas if we put the sentence, the sky is blue, GPT would pay attention to the words sky and blue this time, which gives them a different meaning and within that context than the first example. So again, I'm just kind of sharing this to highlight, I think there's a lot of misinformation around, it's just pulling words from the internet based on like other resources, but it's really just using a lot of the data it's built into their model to create better predictions. And attention is just one of the ways that it does it. And then finally, this is kind of the fun part, which is decoding. So it's got all of this math running in the background, and then it takes all of those numbers based on the prediction, turns them into words. And so that's kind of the final fun step. That's where we get a lot of satisfaction because based on the prompt we put in, we're getting that content generated back to us. So a quick congratulations, you're basically a machine learning engineer now. Give yourselves a pat on the back today. You went through a super crash course on machine learning, which I'm sure my husband would appreciate us all being in the same boat as him now. Amazing. Yes, love the enthusiasm, Brendan and Karen. Cool. So I think when it comes to using, AI in content, there are a few things that I think are really, really important to watch out for. I think in one capacity, AI seems super harmless. You're just, putting stuff into a chatbot, it's bringing stuff back. Great content, great. My work here is done. But in reality, there's just a few things that we as content marketers need to be super cognizant of. So I think the first is that, it hallucinates. And the best analogy I could think of is, think of AI going on the occasional mushroom trip every so often. It just makes things up with its mind. I think, the countermeasure here is that you shouldn't trust this as a source of truth. And also, I wouldn't necessarily use this to research world events. I think it's super important that when content's generated, especially when it's trying to say something is true or factual, you just need to fact check it. There's also software which, similar to Copy.ai and Writer, another generative AI platform, they'll actually provide sources when relevant at the end of the generated content. Again, still, while those sources are there, it's super important to still click through and make sure that they exist. We can also kind of compare this in marketing. There's like specific stats that everyone cites, but we can never actually get to the original source. And so someone could have made it up and attributed it to HubSpot one day, and the entire internet just kind of followed when there's no actual link to that original report. So just as marketers can sometimes hallucinate, generative AI definitely hallucinates. I think the other piece that we should really be cognizant of as well is that AI can be biased. And this is really an area, again, where I think people and humans seriously need to be involved in the content creation process, and really why I don't think our jobs are going anywhere. When you think about the internet today, it's pretty biased if we were to look at, we'll just say the general internet. So when OpenAI built this, it trained their models on a certain set of data, and it's not necessarily the most inclusive across a wide range of factors that, we as marketers take into consideration each day, from gender, sexual orientation, race, and so on. And so I think as you're generating content, it's still really important to, comb through things again and make sure you're going at it with your own DEI lens to make sure that you're continuing to create and uphold, a high level of inclusivity across all of the marketing that you're, creating. And so the final one, I would say it's kind of like a 2-in-1 solution around the risk and countermeasure. Based on all the data it's learning, it's not necessarily copying what's on the internet. But there are situations where, yeah, maybe you will run into copyright risks. But rather, what's on the internet has informed how it's making predictions in those generations. And so on one end, you risk just having really generic content that no one cares to read, just isn't engaging, and doesn't, match exactly what your ICP or your personas are going to care about. But there's also obviously the risk of, going into potential copyright laws and breaching those. So I think as you're generating content, while you're going through that DEI lens, it's also really important that you take a lot of creative freedom. And so I would very much urge you all to use AI as an assistant that's going to help you maybe create that first draft and rough draft, but never use it to create your final product. I think you're going to run into a lot of issues from so many different angles. So those are just risks and countermeasures. And yeah, I've briefly touched on this, but AI will not and should not create ready to publish content. I am very deep in this hole, and this is a hill I think I will die on probably for the rest of eternity, let's say, my own life. Yeah. So I think something else to say is, even though it will not and shouldn't create your final piece of content, a lot of companies will use AI to create content anyways, myself included. But if you're in that kind of environment, I would say your job is going to evolve less into the person who's constantly writing those first drafts and push you into learning to become a better editor, and yeah, better at figuring out that brand aspect of including all of those things across your content program, rather than just someone who's churning out so much content. Not to say any of you do that, but I think these things really vary and depend on the company that you're a part of. Okay, and kind of just jumping into a few, maybe I'll stop if there's any questions. I know I went through a lot just now, but if not, I don't see anyone's faces. So if the chat's empty, I'm just gonna go with the thumbs up.
Yeah, chat looks good.
Perfect.
If anyone has any questions, drop them in.
No, but I wanted to say hi to Hiba.
Oh, hi. Nice to see you. Awesome. This is actually nice. I feel like I don't want to just talk at a screen. So this is good. Thank you for that.
I had a question, if I may.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you use these AI tools, how much of our data is actually being stored? I'm married to a scientist as well, so I know something about backend. But when you use these AI tools regularly, do you think a lot of information is being stored and then it gives you content accordingly?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. We've actually been exploring this, and I've been trying to learn a bit more about that within Copy.ai. And so I know there's a few situations. So for example, OpenAI, super open sourced. And so there were a lot of, or ChatGPT, let's say specifically, a lot of the data that was being input was just feeding the model. And so from that perspective, data wasn't necessarily private. It was actually just, again, being reinforced into the model. And so this was something that came up at Copy.ai because we're starting to talk to more and more enterprise companies. And I can only speak from Copy.ai because I'm in that specific environment, but I am confident that there's other companies within generative AI that have taken similar measures. And so within Copy.ai, we just went through our SOC 2 certification. And what we've been doing is we've been having private environments for each of these enterprises, because for sure, when you're thinking about inputting your personas and your strategy and all these different, probably highly valuable and highly confidential pieces of information, you want that to just live within your sphere. And so I know that's something that is happening more and more. And and it's definitely top of mind. I'm sure for a lot of companies, especially who are, targeting some of those enterprise companies, because they do have a lot more intellectual property that they need to keep safe, as opposed to, some of the startups that I've worked at before, where I'm like, it's fine. No one's trying to take my data other than like these two competitors. So in the grand scheme of things, I could weigh these out. But yeah, I think the worst answer I could give you is it depends. And I think it's just on the marketing teams and the security teams to do their own due diligence when it comes to your comfort level with that. And so does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, I used ChatGPT a few weeks ago. And when I gave for research, I asked it, give me specific, where did you pick this data from? From then on, if I use it again, it still gives me a link. And I'm like, I never asked you this time, but you still remember what I asked you. And that was kind of freaky, but I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, I think like, so there's a thing called prompt chaining. And there's also memory. And so for Copy.ai, for example, we actually build that memory within projects. And so as you're kind of generating, sometimes it didn't give you the right output. So you want to kind of massage. And so it'll have a memory of a certain length of characters or history, almost like you're having a conversation with a friend. It would be really frustrating if they kept forgetting your last text. So there's a certain amount of memory that it'll hold and play off of. Yeah. So again, I think it's very dependent on each tool and what parameters they've kind of built. So yeah, but there is historical context that it's going to save to help improve the generations it's giving you.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm going to try and go through this one a little quickly because I do want to get into actually showing how to use it more practically. The best practice that I have been taught thus far is just garbage in, garbage out. I think the way you can think of this is if you're giving a content brief to a writer and all you give them is a keyword, they don't have a lot to work with. And so the result that they're going to give back to you in that first draft is so vast. And so it's so important to share any helpful context and give them something that's of quality. That way they're set up for success. And so some of the best practices when it comes to writing prompts is the first one is AI loves synonyms. And so I think this is like a very fun trial and error. If you give it a prompt the first time, don't really get back what you want. It's probably not understanding exactly what you're trying to accomplish. And so play around with it. So instead of saying, give me the list of restaurants, you can play around with synonyms like give me the complete list, the whole list, the total unabridged list, the list in its entirety. And so I think it's just, again, super trial and error and just trying to figure out what's the right words that we can use to get the output that you're desiring. The next thing is, when it comes to actually labeling things within your prompt, ditch the synonyms because that's more confusing. So for example, if you're writing a prompt trying to write an outreach email, try not to use the word recipient and prospect in the same prompt. You're just contradicting yourself and it's just adding confusion. Be consistent and say, I'm writing this, the recipient of this email is blah, blah, blah. Write an email for this recipient, for example, or a job description. While we can use it interchangeably in how we speak naturally, try and stay consistent. So for example, here, when we say,
sure.
So for the example here on the right, we're saying write a job description, including the following information: job title, senior cheese taster, job description. And so that's an area where we're repeating and kind of using a word interchangeably. Whereas instead of that first job description, we should be write a job posting. And if you actually go around and play in ChatGPT or Copy.ai or whatever generative AI platform you use, you'll actually see a big difference in most cases of what's generated and what's coming back to you. So it's just best practice advice. I think the other thing is, it doesn't like negativity. If we're gonna tell chat, something like, don't think about pink elephants, it's really gonna think about pink elephants. If I tell you, don't focus or look at the color yellow, chances are you're gonna look at whatever yellow sticky is in that room. And so as you're writing these prompts, if you see yourself using like negative language, like don't do this, just try and massage it and find a way to flip it. So these are just some examples. And then finally, just kind of repeating what I was saying earlier, is you can kind of look at things like a sheet of paper test. If someone writes down a set of instructions on a piece of paper, which would you find easier to execute on? If someone just said, write a story about me, or if they said, write a story about the challenges I've faced as a robot trying to make friends at a dinner party. More context, as we give, more context within our prompts, we're going to get way better output. And yeah, hopefully I'm not butchering your name, Thierno, but you got it. Good guess. Okay, so I know I've shared a lot of information. Now, we can actually put some of this stuff into practice. Before we dive in, I just wanted to show a few use cases that we can kind of walk through. We won't walk through all of these, but I kind of like to categorize it as using AI to walk, to run, and to sprint. And so using AI to walk, things that'll get you maybe 5 or 10% of the way of that final piece. Use it to rewrite sentences, use it to write headlines, subject lines, to name your newsletter, for example. I actually used Copy.ai to name our Copy.ai newsletter because I just found, a lot of creative block, a big creative block that way. And then run, I think things out will get you a little bit closer. Writing that first draft of a blog, a landing page, newsletter copy, writing a G2 email campaign, asking for your customers to leave reviews, building that first draft of your sales outbound sequence, running some competitor analysis, or using sales transcripts to build a voice of customer document. And then finally, sprinting. This is something that isn't live to most people yet, but it's completely blown my mind. And so I do want to show some of the ways we've been using workflows, which will come out soon. Some of the use cases that I've started dabbling in, but I'm still trying to, refine and gauge to get closer and closer to, 70%, let's say, is actually taking our webinar transcripts and repurposing them into blog ideas, a first draft, social posts for that first draft, and also how we're going to share that in our email newsletter. We've been taking blog links as we're publishing blogs on our website and turning them into newsletter entries. And then outbound sales, we've been uploading CSVs with a list of prospects that we have and their LinkedIn profiles. And it provides a profile summary and generates a personalized 3-step cold automated sequence using some of those details. And so this is just me kind of showing and sharing some of the possibilities of things you can do. And this is limited to my own way of thinking. And so that will continue to grow. And so, yeah, maybe we'll kind of jump in. So, sorry, just to answer Brendan's question real quick around if there's a best practice for how much context to use to AI models, but not overwhelm them. The way I've been kind of educated, let's say, internally, is that there's a fine line. I think a lot of prompt engineers honestly try and use it as a game of what's the least amount of characters, let's say, or words I can use in my prompt to get the best result. And that's just a fun challenge for them. But again, I think with so many things, it's, this is such a new space that it's really all trial and error. And as long as you're following the best practices around consistent labeling and things like that, it makes it a lot easier to figure out, I think, over time as you kind of build that muscle. And for Joel, yes, I have used AI to edit some work or a piece of content, and I will actually be showing that today. It's been very cool how we've been able to do this. So, okay, so some prompt examples. The first one, I'm going to brainstorm some ideas for Grow Class and their next webinars. So again, we're just in the chat interface of Copy.ai, and the prompt I've written is, I'm looking to brainstorm webinar ideas for, and then I've put the Grow Class website. For each webinar idea, include a proposed title and a short description of what the webinar should cover. Our focus is to run webinars that are engaging, actionable, and relevant to our audience. Our audience mainly consists of people interested in learning more about growth marketing, from best practices to getting inspired by clever strategies from others in the industry. Our audience ranges from new marketers to highly experienced ones. So we'll just try this out and see what kind of comes back. And we can see that it's starting to generate potential titles and also some descriptions. So cool, I agree. Are there any that stand out to anyone? Because we can do some more fun stuff here. 8. All right, hyper-targeting. So similar, sorry, I can't remember who asked, but similar to the previous question around history and context, is now we can kind of have a conversation with this thing to say, right? Yeah, I can definitely share all of these prompts. Hannah, I think if I was to push them directly into the Grow Class webinar page, it will, but typically it'll scan the website to see the kinds of things that they're marketing and around the copy on their website. I'm not sure if it's specifically just their homepage. That's a question I can find out. But yeah, if I was to submit the webinar page, yeah. So we can say write an outline for number 8 for let's say idea number 8. So let's say write a webinar outline, let's say for idea number 8, and we'll see what comes back. I actually haven't tried with this example yet, so we're going live. So it's starting to say, here's the outline for the webinar. Pretty long one, which is great. And then obviously you can kind of go back and forth. Again, this is an incredible tool to help us move faster. The way I think about it is I will never look at a blank page again because for me, it's really debilitating. And I have such a hard time kind of starting any content piece from a blank page. It's really, really overwhelming. And so, yeah, we can take this and massage in our own brand identity, our own ideas, the things that we feel are going to be most helpful to our audience. And so that's just one example I'll show. Another one is summarizing an article. So if someone actually wants to drop in just a blog you've recently written, then we can kind of go with that example.
So you're saying if one of us could share a blog that we've written using AI?
No, just any blog you've written. Okay, perfect. Oh, hi, Ryan. Amazing. Welcome. Okay, so we are going to go into summarizing Ryan's blog. So again, I'm not going to give the AI that much context, so really going to see what comes back. So summarize this blog post. Again, it could be because I'm not giving it that much direction, we could be getting something that's really long, we could get something that's really short. So we'll try this out first, and then I'll kind of walk through how prompts can change things a bit. Yeah. Okay, so a little long. That's okay. But I think the cool thing I will say about Copy.ai, and there's a bunch of generative AI platforms that do this now, is they're actually able to scan live web pages. So it's pulling also, I think, the other piece from the internet today. And so something that, I actually don't know if it's changed in ChatGPT. I haven't tried in a while. But for a while, if you were to ask it who won the Super Bowl, their data was only trained up until 2021. And so it would tell you, I'm not a big football fan, so I don't know why I chose that example, but it would tell you confidently that whatever team won in 2021 was the team that recently won the Super Bowl. Maybe I will try with a shorter article. Oh, hello, Zach. Okay, unable, might be too long. We might have blown through those tokens. Good work, Ryan. Okay, so summarize this article. We'll try that now with this article with Hassan. Again, while we're doing things live, things can break. And sometimes, that's okay. If you use chat behind an API. That's a great question. And I am going to actually save that to ask our team. Still working. This might take a minute. Oh, Carrie, absolutely. Maybe Zach can help me debug here or something. So Carrie, some examples. We actually have a prompt library that we've built, which, you can have captions, content, headlines, Instagram captions, LinkedIn posts, TikTok scripts, Twitter threads, YouTube descriptions, and so on. And so weird, this was working for me yesterday. So those are just very templated examples. And again, you can continue to refine and say, so maybe we can try. Oh, there we go. All right, we got something. You've tried these prompts, just wondering if there's anything more specific. Yeah, I mean, I would honestly play around with the amount of context you're sharing. So it could be around, I want this to lead the audience to click and leave some mystery or excite them, or I'm focused on a highly technical marketing ops audience, or whatever it might be. Again, those are just very general prompts, but just trying to play around with the context you're adding. And so this is obviously a very long summary, just going back to this example. So we can kind of go back and say, summarize this article again, but in 3 sentences. Maybe we'll take the but out. In 3 sentences. So now we've kind of have something that's a little bit shorter. And then something fun that I like to do, just to show that we could play around a bit more, is summarize this article using as Ted Lasso. So whoever watches Ted Lasso, hopefully everyone. But yeah, you can kind of just have some fun with it. So yeah, Carrie, maybe we can go through your example. I just posted this article around summarizing, summarize articles with AI. let's go back to chat. So I'm just going to clear it here. And we can say, write 3 Twitter, or maybe we can say LinkedIn posts for the following for this article. The target audience is content marketers looking to be more efficient in their day-to-day jobs. Use casual language and emoji and some emojis when relevant. So here we can kind of go through. And again, like I said, it's very trial and error. If I don't like what's generated, can obviously change things up in terms of the prompt. Michelle, this is something we've been trying to do, but I think, again, there's just so many hallucinations right now in the software. And so I think to say legitimate, sometimes it causes too much of a parameter. So yes and no, but I think that's just part of the countermeasure that we have to take, is that we need to really focus on fact checking. And yes, Michael, I am so glad you have asked this question, because we actually just launched Brand Voice yesterday and I've been having so much fun with it. And so maybe I'll just quickly show the way this works is that you go into the back and you basically want to build a brand voice. You just put in a bunch of content examples. Yeah, no problem, Carrie. So you put in a bunch of content examples and it'll actually, or like paragraphs from blogs or social media posts, your homepage copy. And so from there, Copy.ai in the background will actually just analyze the tone of voice. And so I did some examples yesterday. There's Ted Lasso, there's Yoda, there's Donald Trump, and there's Copy.ai. So if we go back into chat, I can actually change this into, let's say, Yoda. Rewrite post 1. We'll go with that and just see kind of what comes out. And so very Star Warsy. So yeah, and it actually did a pretty good job. I don't think I put in, I was playing around with it a little bit yesterday, so I don't think I put in the best examples for Copy.ai. But for the most part, I think just based on a few examples, it was pretty great in what it was able to generate. Can you skip straight to describing? Ryan, yes, you can definitely describe your brand voice. Not within the brand voice feature necessarily, but you do have the ability to change up the copy you're feeding it. And so I think when we went to, I can go back, I actually had a good laugh with Donald Trump and how it was bold, unapologetic, and controversial. The voice of this brand is one that doesn't shy away from making strong statements and express opinions that may not be universally popular. And so it was pretty spot on, and I only really fed it 5 or 6, 1 to 2 sentence quotes. And so I found that really, really great. But that was kind of what it pulled. And so if we go back to Ted Lasso, witty, conversational, relatable, and slightly self-deprecating. In some ways, this feels like my voice too, minus the witty. But yeah, super, super cool. And I think the purpose of this too is as you're going to write these prompts, you're not just inputting these things over and over and over again. And Carrie, you absolutely can. I think right now, the best way I would say to go about it is just to say rewrite. I do want to quickly show our editorial content review. And so workflows is something, again, that's going to be coming down in the next couple months, hopefully, in launching. But we've been dog fooding it a lot at Copy.ai. If you're anything like me, when you send out emails, it is so nerve-wracking when you to hit send, because you're like, is this clear? Is there spelling mistakes? Like, what have I missed? Because so much can get lost between that Google Doc that you've written everything into your email platform. And so I think for me, at least, I have a lot of anxiety when it comes to sending emails. And so I wrote an example below that has some spelling mistakes. So I'll just put this in here and you can all read for yourselves. There's a spelling mistake, there's a spelling mistake, lots of exclamation marks, but maybe that's our brand. And then the last sentence, just absolutely, the last two sentences don't really make that much sense. And so what we've kind of been doing is we've been pushing everything through our editorial content review. Most of this is around grammatical errors, some style guidelines. And so it'll actually, when we run this, it's going to review and edit the content. It's going to check the style guide that we prompted in the back end, as well as check the voice and tone, make sure it's matching ours. And then it's actually going to write a list of what edits it made. So it changed thank you with the 2 U's to 1 U for proper spelling, added a space for readability, changed night, day to day, added a space before and after can be. And so we get that final output that's, legible and free of those spelling mistakes. It took away a bunch of those exclamation marks, which is part of my brand, but not necessarily part of Copy.ai's brand. And so that's a really, really fun workflow that we've been able to build. The other workflow, what does Copy.ai aim to offer users that's different from ChatGPT and others? I'll quickly just answer this. I think ChatGPT is, obviously free to use, same with Copy.ai, but there's just a lot of differences that I find stand out. If we're to compare both chat platforms side by side, there's a lot of similarities. Put in a prompt, you get back content. I think some of the differences that are coming out is obviously brand voice is one, where you can continue to have generated content within your brand in your brand's voice, which is a great name for that feature. I think the other piece is info-based, which maybe I'll show from here. We've been able to actually, there's a lot of pieces in marketing, let's say talking about specific features, talking about personas, talking about specific people we're marketing to, jobs to be done, all these different things that we may or may not want to include in our prompts. And so this feature is kind of like a place where you would put in all of your company information to help drive better content generation. And so if you're in the platform as much as I am, for example, and generating a ton of content, it's really annoying to just keep saying like, here's our positioning statement and here's our audience and blah, blah, blah. Whereas in InfoBase, all I need to do is create a landing page for, and then we just do a hashtag, and then we would talk about a specific feature. Create a landing page, let's say outline for, I actually don't know what's, oops, hashtag brand voice. Follow this format, H1, subheading, H2, paragraph, H2, paragraph, CTA. So this is just kind of, instead of me spending, a lot of time trying to explain what brand voice is, who we're marketing it to, it actually just builds, pulls from InfoBase. So I think, again, just on the track of efficiency, that's a big piece. But I think, as every company has a chat platform, the bigger and bigger differentiator that Copy.ai is bringing is truly in this workflows platform, where instead of, writing a prompt, then writing another prompt based on the generated output, then writing another prompt. We've kind of just streamlined it into all into one. And so, for example, creating a blog brief is maybe this one I'll just show real quick. Is we have a keyword. So I'm going to run this. And the keyword is, I'll say too, with workflows, you would just build this through chat as well. So instead of now generating copy, you're generating processes that you can easily automate. And so it's so cool. I'm still trying to really wrap my head around this. So the keyword, let's say we're going for, is AI for content marketing. The audience, we'll go with a content marketing audience. Search intent, informational, competitive pieces. Here is a piece from HubSpot using that same, targeting that same keyword. And a secondary keyword we'll use is generative AI. So I'm showing this too because this is actually the first step in me building any brief now. Is I run everything through a workflow, or I run all of our briefs through a workflow, and then I, again, take some time, flesh it out in the way that I want it, in my vision. Carrie, does Copy.ai have training to understand how to use this platform? Yes, and we're still in the process of trying to build this as much as possible, because again, this is such a big gap in the entire industry around AI. And so here we can see that it's starting to summarize the brief, analyze that competitive piece, and then actually write that first draft. So word count, it's saying about 800 to 1,000. It's got an intro for us, H2 with bullets that the writer can write about, H3 within that, H2, and so on. And then some secondary keywords that maybe the writer can include. And then it's also provided 5 potential titles that we can use for that content piece that are SEO optimized. And so, yeah, there's so much to play around with. I think we've kind of just been saying imagination is the limit right now because there's just so many cool things that you can build. And obviously my head is pretty stuck in marketing use cases because there are things I can do for my job better. And so I think the other thing I will just quickly touch over, because I know we've got 5 minutes left, is I just put together some helpful resources. The first is, me taking a half-hour lecture my husband gave me on how ChatGPT works. So it's specifically the section I've linked here. A little bit about what we talked about just goes in if you're a visual learner and need to read. That's a great resource. Writer produced a really great piece around generative AI risks and countermeasures. Copy.ai has built a wide range of tools and pre-written prompts to help you kind of get started. And also just think of different ways you can use generative AI in your job. We've also put together a bunch of prompts that you can use for sales and marketing teams. Carrie, to answer your question, we've put together a series that we've started building, which we're calling Copy 101. And it's on our YouTube channel under the playlist there, under the playlist Copy 101, if you're looking. And it just covers a wide range of potential use cases you can have and how we actually do it step by step. And then our prompt engineer, Anna, she's kind of kicked off a new series we're launching, which is Prompt School. And she goes way more in depth into those prompt writing best practices. And then the final thing I'll touch is there's some generative AI tools that I absolutely love and I use in my day-to-day. Copy.ai, I think, of course. Midjourney, you can access through Discord. 100% of the blog images that we have at Copy.ai are all generated through Midjourney. And so if you've been like me, a team of one, or a marketer with not a lot of resources and designs, typically at the bottom of that list, I am not a designer. And so I think I've hacked my way enough to look somewhat professional in the past, and I don't need to anymore. This thing is so cool. And yeah, you just, again, still learning how to write the best and right prompts. Oh, Gamma, that's awesome. Yeah, so Gamma or Tome Those are two really, really cool ones where similar, you put in the prompt and it starts to build that first draft of a presentation for you. And then you go in and, add the right images, add the right copy. So yeah, I know we've got a couple minutes left. So yeah, thanks for joining, Tammy. If anyone has any other questions, super happy to answer now or later. Feel free to reach out whenever. But yeah, I'll clean up these slides and we'll get them to you as soon as possible as well.
Oh my goodness, Hiba, that was so good. There were so many moments where my mouth would just drop open because I was like looking at this, like how powerful that tool is. I can't even believe that. Even with the examples of all the webinars you could do just from wow, I'm blown away. Thank you so much.
5 months ago, I was like, I'm not using this software. What do you mean? But again, there's so many cool ways to just, save some time and sanity.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to drop Hiba's links in the chat again for everyone if you want to connect with her there. She's also in our Slack community. If you are in Grow class, you can find her in Slack. But yeah, thank you so much, Hiba, for your time. I will be sending out the replay email for everyone who missed it or wants to watch this again, because I definitely will be. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for joining, everyone, and for the great questions.
Yeah,
Amazing.
awesome. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a great day.